Welcome to the Rotary Club of Seattle. It's good to see everybody. We're the fourth oldest and one of the largest Rotary clubs in the world. We've got a great program today. Our Attorney General Bob Ferguson is here. Please welcome our Attorney General. I asked our Attorney General before we got started today if he had any idea when he took office that he would be, for lack of a better term, a celebrity attorney who works for a state in our great country. He said, no, there's no way of knowing these things. Bob Ferguson has served the state of Washington as our Attorney General since 2013. When I asked how he wanted to be introduced, he said, well, first and foremost, I'm a dad. I'm the father of two 9-year-old twins and a fourth-generation Washingtonian. Attorney General Ferguson is also an internationally rated chess master, a 2-time champion of the state of Washington. So if anybody plays chess in here, here's a guy you might want to take on. Professionally, he has litigated all kinds of cases, consumer protection, cases involving same-sex couples and rights in Washington. More recently, litigation when it comes to the DACA program, and even today, the travel ban, which is, as we speak, working itself through the court system. I don't think I'm going to give more of an introduction than that, other than when I started thinking about why it was important that we have this program today, I think if anything else, over these past 9 or 10 months, we as Americans have come to understand one thing. Regardless of which political party you affiliate with, we're a nation of laws. We're a nation of laws. When people join the military in our country, they swear an allegiance to the Constitution of the United States, the legal document giving us our personal rights in this country. They don't swear allegiance to a political party or a general or a president. They swear allegiance to the law. And I think that's what's most exciting. And we are seeing our laws being challenged from all sides. And it's why I couldn't be happier to have our Attorney General Bob Ferguson today. Please give him a warm Seattle 4 welcome. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mark, for that wonderful introduction. And I probably will speak a bit about the rule of law. That phrase is actually on my handwritten notes here. But first, thanks to all of you for having me here today. We like to claim the rights. Mark's brother, Craig, as many of you know, used to be the chief deputy for Rob McKenna when he was the Attorney General. So we sort of claim the rights as one of our own in the AG's office. And in the AG's office, I'll give you a little background about the office, touch on a couple issues, a little bit about what's going on with the Trump administration, and then I want to open up to questions you have and allow plenty of time for that. And feel free to ask about anything I bring up or anything I don't bring up. Feel free to ask whatever's on your mind. But the AG's office, just to give you a sense, we're the largest law firm in the state of Washington. So we have about 600 attorneys, 600 professional staff, 13 offices all around the state. So it's a big operation. And in doing that work, whenever I, for example, speak to the new attorneys, we have an annual retreat for the new attorneys. Whenever I speak with them, the quality that I emphasize with them in terms of the work that they're going to be doing on behalf of you and the state of Washington is independence. Of course, we need to do excellent legal work, but in doing that work, it's critically important that all of our state clients, and we represent every state board, commission, agency, you name it, as well as the people, that they trust the work we're doing is independent. It's not based on my political party. It's not based on what I wish the law was, as opposed to what the law actually is, and that's very important. And in Washington, as Craig knows and others here, we have a long tradition of independence in the AG's office. I'll just give you one example. When I became Attorney General, I followed Rob McKenna. And by the way, I should just mention aside, I've known Rob for a long, long time. We were at the University of Washington together, and Rob was student body president at the University of Washington a few years before I later became student body president at the UW. So I first met him back then in student government. And then he later went back east to law school. I later went back east to law school. Then Rob returned to King County, went to work for a large corporate law firm where he practiced for 5 years. I later came back to King County, went to work for a large corporate law firm. Practiced for 5 years. Then Rob, as many of you know, Rob ran for the King County Council, got elected on his first try, served for 9 years. I later ran for the King County Council, got elected on my first try, served for 9 years, and then followed Rob to become Attorney General. So, everybody was really interested in what Rob was going to do with his career after leaving public service, but nobody's more interested in what he was going to do than me and my wife. We were We were really interested in what he was going to do next. So this is a true story. I know Rob very well, and I was texting him after he left public office, and I said, Rob, I think we're at the point in our professional relationship where you have to run your career decisions by me first. I've got an interest in this, but I digress a little bit. But in following Rob, we are different political parties, Rob and I, and the way the office is structured, as Craig knows, you have a chief deputy in charge of the legal operation, and 5 or 6 deputies who manage all the different divisions. Those are the top lawyers in the law firm, basically. And I asked those deputies and the chief deputy who served under Rob to serve as my chief deputy and my deputies. Now, that's unusual, right? Typically, when a new executive comes in at the state level, particularly of a different political party, you clear out the top folks and bring in your own people. And I had no idea what the politics were of those deputies and chief deputy, but what I knew was their reputation for running an independent, nonpartisan law firm. I knew that by their reputation. I did not know them personally, but I knew that by reputation, so I asked them all to stay on and serve for me in the same capacity, which they all agreed. I'm willing to bet we're the only AG's office in the country where that happens. What I found out later on is Rob McKenna, when he followed Chris Gregoire, asked all their different political parties. He asked all of Chris Gregoire's deputies to stay on and serve under her. So there was a fellow who retired not too long ago, Rob Costello, who's been a deputy in our office under multiple AGs of different political parties. I think that's good for our office, right? I think that's good for our office. I think it's good for the people we serve, that folks have a sense of, hey, this is not some political operation. It would be unthinkable in our state for a new AG to fire line attorneys, the AAGs who are doing the day-to-day work. In other states, you see that all the time. A new AG comes in and they're clearing out line attorneys. And I just want you, that would be unthinkable, truly, in our office. So that doesn't mean you or the people of the state always agree with every decision I make, or Rob, or Chris, or Slade Gordon, or Ken Eikenberry made, but it's coming from a place of true independence, I think, which is really important, and I think a hallmark of our office, which we take very, very seriously. One more thing before I get into my remarks is that this is my 101st Rotary meeting since I became Attorney General. So the plan was, thanks, yeah, right. The plan was, because you guys are the biggest, the oldest, this was supposed to be number 100. But we went back to count them up a couple weeks ago and we realized we'd missed one. So this is now 101. So my 100th was literally the smallest one I've been to in the Tri-Cities. It was literally a Rotary of about 15 or 16 folks. So this one's a little bit different. But what I love about Rotaries, large, small, in between, you know, those 100 Rotaries have come in 26 or 27 different counties of the state. I get a sense of the perspective of the people all around the state as a result of speaking to Rotaries. I appreciate that Rotaries, service above self, right? And in many respects, Rotaries are in the same business that the people in my office are in. Every Rotary is interested in helping folks in their community, every one. And in my office, every attorney and professional staff in my office, take my word for it, could make more money working for a private law firm. But they choose to work for you because they're interested in service to the people of the state. So I appreciate the chance to be here with all of you. My goal, by the way, is hit all 100 and I think there's 187 Rotaries in the state, so the goal is to hit them all. So I'll report back when I'm done. A couple quick issues going on, then I'll turn to your questions. We have the work we do on behalf of the state, in which the state is the client. Again, state board, commission, agency, elected officials, they're the client. We give them legal advice. We give them options, we call it, options-based advice. They decide what policy they want to pursue. We're their law firm. Another area we have is the work we do directly on behalf of the people, which would be the focus of my remarks, directly on behalf of the people. And that is areas like consumer protection, antitrust, criminal justice, civil rights. So when you see the state of Washington filing a lawsuit in that context, that's a decision I'm making, not the governor or the secretary of state or somebody else. The client, so to speak, is all of you for those types of cases. In the consumer protection context, we enforce the State Consumer Protection Act. It says you cannot engage in unfair or deceptive business practice. That's the law. And we enforce that for consumers and on behalf of businesses that are playing by the rules. They should not be at a competitive disadvantage to a competitor who isn't following the rules. We receive about 30,000 consumer complaints a year come into our office. So it's a lot. And we have a team that handles those cases. I'll give you an example of just one of those cases. There's an entity back in the Midwest, I think they're in Hawaii or Wisconsin, and what their business model was all around the country, and they did this in Washington, is they mailed 50,000 or so letters in Washington state alone. They did this all around the country, but in Washington state, they sent about 50,000 letters to businesses, and they focused on small to medium-sized businesses. And the letters said, words effective, hey, small business owner, you need to file your corporate minutes with the Secretary of State. You're past due, CRCW XYZ. You're past due. It costs, I think they said $100 or $125. It costs $100 to file it. You're past due. Bad things will happen if you don't get it in. Return address and return envelope is here with an Olympia return address, and get it in right away. 2,900 Washington businesses mailed in their $100 or $125. You know where this is going, right? There is no such requirement. There is no such fee. It doesn't exist. But if you get this letter, take my word for it, it looks real. My family had a meat market in Everett for many generations, right? They were busy running a meat market. They did not have an in-house lawyer to handle that kind of stuff. My guess is if my grandmother, Edith Hosman, got a letter like that back in the 30s when she was a single mom running a meat market, she was the owner and business manager of it, she's probably too busy to do anything other than just pay the damn thing, right? Looks real. 2,900 businesses did that. So what I discovered was AGs around the country were settling with this company for very small amounts of money, which allowed them to essentially continue doing and making money. The penalties weren't enough to deter them. So I talked to my team. I said, no, we're going to take this case to court. We filed the case, took it to court, had our hearings. We prevailed. The court would determine that these guys had violated our Consumer Protection Act. And so what we asked for was the following. We asked for all those 2,900 businesses get their money back. The court granted that. So all those businesses got their check back. All of our costs and fees, there's no cost to you for us bringing the case. And we asked for a penalty. The penalty was, I think, $850,000. That money goes to the state of Washington to pay for whatever the state legislature thinks is appropriate. Consumer protection is one of the few money-making enterprises in our state. Money for the people, money for the state, right? I mean, it really is. And that's an example of the work we do. So on behalf of consumers or sometimes businesses are the target. And this is not an isolated case. We've seen others like this all around the state as well. Another issue I'll mention is a lawsuit we recently filed in a completely different context around opioids and the opioid epidemic that we're seeing across the country and here in Washington State. Very, very serious issue. Just give you a couple statistics. I could give you a lot, but I'll give you two. In Washington State, on average, 2 Washingtonians die every day due to an opioid overdose. Okay, that's every day. And for a year that we have, Kate Kelly from my team is here. She's very involved on opioid issues here. If you have any questions, Kate's here and handles on the policy side the work we're doing on this. I think in 2011 or 2012, I forget the year, that we have data. To give you a sense of how many opioids are prescribed in Washington State alone, there were enough opioids prescribed in that 1 year, 2011 or 2012, for every man, woman, and child in Washington State. Every man, woman, child have a 16-day supply, right? So Washington, long story very short, it's a big challenge. Washington is, we may not be hit quite as hard as some states in Appalachia or in the Northeast, but west of Mississippi, we are arguably the worst hit state and one of the hardest in the country. The LA Times did a lengthy story about opioids. They could have focused on any community in the country for this long front page detailed story. They focused on Everett, Washington, Snohomish County. That's the community they chose to focus on the harm that's being done. I'm quite sure there are folks here who have been impacted by this, friends, family, children. I mean, it's a big, big issue. We were part of what we call a multi-state. About 40 AGs of both parties were investigating different manufacturers of opioids. I decided to pull away from that multi-state, and we filed our own lawsuit against the largest manufacturer, that's Purdue Pharma. Happy to chat about that in more detail if you like. There are pros and cons of going with a multi-state. You share the resources, but there are disadvantages as well. You're only as strong as your weakest state in a multi-state. Everybody's got to agree. So we filed that lawsuit a couple weeks ago. I'll just give you one example of the conduct that we are asserting is that Purdue manufactured, that they created OxyContin, for example, one of their products. Early on, they claimed, and 60 Minutes is a big story just Sunday night. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out about the opioid crisis and what's been going on. And Purdue said, hey, this is really not going to be addictive to folks, doctors. You don't have to worry about it. And but people started coming back into clinics showing symptoms of addiction. So doctors contacted Purdue saying, hey, you told us this would be, we're seeing folks with addiction, with symptoms. What Purdue Pharma said in their writings and what they said verbally as well was, no, those things you're seeing, those symptoms, that's not addiction. They called it pseudo-addiction. That's their word. That's pseudo-addiction. They're not really addicted. They're in pain. You only get one guess what Purdue Pharma told those doctors to do to treat that pain. Give them more pills. That's, gives me no pleasure to share that with you, but It's what we're alleging. So the stakes are big in that case. I'll be interested in what that national multi-state of AGs is going to do. I have no doubt something will come from that as well. But it's a big lift for our office and our team to bring a case like that, but it's an important one, I think, on behalf of the people. Lastly, I'll just touch on briefly, I won't get into specific cases really much, but I'm happy to take questions on sort of all things that are going on with the Trump administration, and our office is obviously, to your point, Mark, we're very involved with a lot of litigation with the administration, which I understand is high profile and people have strong views about it. I get that, but I'm happy to chat about it. I guess a couple points just to give you a sense of scale. We have since January filed, I think it's 17 lawsuits against the administration. So it's, there's a lot going on. 4 of those cases have been resolved. As I like to say, it's not like I'm keeping score, but we are 4-0. We're 4-0 on that. I'm just going to put that out there. We won all 4. But more seriously, I do mention that record, not that we're going to win them all. That's not the way the law works. But I just came from a meeting this morning with my team about what's going on these litigations. And, it's my job for us to be very thoughtful in the cases we bring. That's my job. Because every lawsuit I bring, I'm bringing on behalf of the people of my state. And I realize when you're suing the president, that's no lawsuit should you ever take lightly, especially so if you're suing the president. But I think, I'm proud of that record because I think it shows we're bringing the right kinds of cases, right? And the cases run the gamut from that first travel ban to protecting 17,000 dreamers we have in our state who came to this country as children through no fault of their own. And I'll just give you 2 things I'll mention about those cases that you may or may not be aware of. They don't get covered as much in the media. Is that in each of these cases, I think here's what I want. In each of these cases, there's a lot at stake. Travel ban, the ability of people to travel, right, freely. We had students at our colleges and universities who are abroad, who are here legally with green cards, who are not allowed to come back to Washington State because the travel ban went into effect. Dreamers, my God, the impact on them, the stakes are pretty high. So in each of these cases, there are real people with real lives that are being dramatically impacted, right? But also in so many of these cases, there's a lot at stake regarding the rule of law. For example, in that travel ban case, when the Department of Justice wrote their brief in response to our lawsuit challenging the Trump administration, they did not simply argue that the president has broad authority to issue an executive order, which he does. He does. He's got broad authority to do that. What they actually wrote in their brief was, I'm quoting now, that the president's authority is unreviewable by the courts. That's your Department of Justice. Look, in times of war, president's actions have been reviewed by the courts. It's never been the law that they are immune from other branches of government. We're a democracy. It's never been the law. It's not the law, not the law now. I won't allow that to be the law. And they have now walked that back in versions 2 and 3 of the travel ban, thankfully. But it's an example of what's at stake, the true limits of presidential authority. There's a reason why that first travel ban case is taught in law schools, right? They try to assert, you can't look at this. And in the Dreamers case, and I'll wrap up, is that there's obviously a lot at stake for those folks, but one thing I'll mention is that in order to become a Dreamer, in order to qualify for the DACA program, you have to meet certain criteria. You also, of course, have to come out of the shadows and provide information to the federal government. Who you are, where you live, where you go to school, where you work, who your family members are. You got to provide that to the federal government. And the deal was the federal government promised we'll never use that information against you. Seems like a fair deal. An American deal, right? It's a deal. On the day that the president announced he was going to rescind those protections, something interesting happened. There's a website for the DACA program the federal government runs, has a Q&A. One of the questions is, what will happen to my personal information? Will it ever be used against me? The answer has always been, we'll never use that information against you. It's on the website, it's a Q&A. On the day they announced the rescission of the DACA protections, that Q&A was taken down from that website. Look, I get that folks have different views on immigration issues or the travel ban. I get that, believe me, I'm from a family of 7. Thanksgiving table, we have healthy disagreements on issues, right? But so much is at stake on who we are, I think, as a people. We made a deal with these dreamers. We made a deal. We need to stick with that, right? And that troubles me that there's been no assurance whatsoever that information really will be protected for those folks. So I'm going to stop there in the interest of getting to your questions. I think someone's got a microphone, and I'll look forward to, and feel free to ask about anything at all. Happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Bob, in case you lost track after AG, Rob McKenna ran for governor.
Fair enough.
But my question is, of all the issues, matters, complaints that come before the AG office, you can't handle them all.
Correct.
How do you go about prioritizing and triaging?
That's a good question. It is a huge, vast law firm, so you're absolutely right. And candidly, that can be a challenge sometimes, right? But that's why I have a chief deputy and deputies who help. They're in communication with the line attorneys, division chiefs, and they help decide what goes to me, right? So I have to trust my team to bring cases to me that they think I need to look at. In addition, some are, I think, relatively apparent. So, for example, cases involving McCleary, education, K through 12. We defend the state in that lawsuit. I'm looking at that complaint before it gets filed, right? I want to see that myself. So I think it's fair to say, or key motions. I'm meeting with that team. I'm reading that brief. I'm going to edit that thing. And so what I would describe as big cases. They're all important, but big cases with huge stakes. I tend to be reading those complaints and meeting with the team about those. I'm lucky in that my Solicitor General is a guy named Noah Purcell. You should have him come sometime, by the way. He's fantastic. Franklin High School grad, University of Washington, Mary Gates Scholar, went to Harvard Law School, edited the Law Review at Harvard, clerked on the U.S. Supreme Court, was minding his own business, practicing at a private law firm, making a lot of money, and he became my Solicitor General at a very young age for that job, 31 or 32. Fantastic. I mean, the most gifted lawyer I've ever worked with, for sure. I mean, you will be hearing about him someday, beyond what he's doing now, which is fantastic work. He's a uniquely gifted guy. So I have a lot of trust in Noah, and so his office is right next to mine. It's not unusual. I get a brief or a complaint that I'm not satisfied with. I walk in his office and I say, Noah, can you do your thing with this? And he does, yeah.
My question's a little bit more directed than that. It's specifically about the opioid epidemic and your thoughts on the legality of the safe injection sites. It's a huge issue, and you probably can't express too much personal opinion, and I don't think you have a crystal ball. But what are your thoughts on this issue?
Sure. On the safe injection sites, I've been aware that's been going on at the city and county level, and I think a court recently struck it down, if I read the headline correctly. I can't speak to the legality. I've not read it. I just got to be honest. I've hardly read the news stories about it. I've got my hands full of stuff that I've got. So that's an important issue. I don't want to minimize it by any stretch of the imagination. It's just I'm often asked about issues sort of beyond what I'm doing, but what I'm doing is taking up 180% of my bandwidth right now. Yeah. So I just don't have a good answer for the legality of that. Yeah, I've not read it.
Hi, Bob, over here.
Hello.
I just want to thank you for coming, and also thank you for standing up for women's rights and women's issues.
You bet.
And my question is, do you see a tax on Title IX, and what do you see in that future?
Yeah, for Title IX, I mean, there are some concerns, right, from what's come from the administration. We've not taken any legal action this time, right? They're examining their options. Something may be coming, I think, in the next 60 days or so, I think is what they announced. So AGs have had some discussions about it. I think it's premature to say what's going to happen. We need to see what the administration does. But I think it's fair to say I have a weekly meeting with my team that works on litigation we've filed or potentially might be filing. And that's the type of issues on that list that we're just monitoring to see what comes from the administration on that. And we'll see what happens when it does.
Yes, if you could comment on the Hearst decision.
Well, in terms of commenting in terms of well, the courts weighed in on it. I mean, it's so our job is the legislature that's held up issues with the legislature and putting together a capital budget, and our job is to give legal advice to our clients about what their options are, the legislature, in terms of how they want to handle it. So we've been doing that, right? And but our job is to advise our clients when a decision like that comes out, and they make the decisions on the policy standpoint of how they want to handle the policy.
I'm very interested in your broader perspective on our situation as a nation right now and the law, the Constitution, the presidency, and the separation of powers. You go on Facebook and it's pretty depressing right now. A lot of doom and gloom. The world is ending soon, as you know. Could you talk a little bit about legally, constitutionally, is irreparable damage being done, or is this just a phase and we'll go back to business as usual in a few years?
Well, that's a hard question to answer. I guess, I'll start by saying I tend to be an optimist. So take that for what it's worth, right? That tends to be the way I look at the world. Do I think this is a challenging time for our country? Yes. I mean, I'm not trying to give a political speech, but you're asking my thoughts. I think it's a challenging time. That said, my feeling is that I have confidence in our institutions, which I think are larger than any one individual or even one administration. That's just my view. And so for me, it wasn't a surprise, for example, that President Trump's first defeat was in a courtroom on our travel ban. That was his first defeat. Look, in a courtroom, all that matters is facts your case, the Constitution, the law. It's not the loudest voice that prevails. It's not. And so, do I wish we had to file so much litigation? No. Do I think it's important? Yes. And so I have a lot of confidence. Our country's been around a long time. We have these institutions for a reason. Our founding fathers were wise in the way they set it up. And look, when Barack Obama was president, Republican AGs filed a lot of lawsuits against him, right? And that might have been frustrating for supporters of the Obama administration, but these things had to get worked out in the court of law. And in some respects, I think that instills a certain confidence in the people. Take Obamacare, for example, right? My predecessor sued on that, went to the U.S. Supreme Court, 5-4, it was upheld. But at that point, I think it helps folks move on in a sense. Not that it's ever going to completely resolve it, but hey, the courts have weighed in. It's constitutional. We're having a policy debate even now, but the courts have weighed in. So I tend to be an optimist on it. And I think what I do find, this may go a little beyond your question, but sort of the tone of the debate in our politics today is, it's tough, it's tough. Politics is not for a thin-skinned person, I'm lucky. I'm one of 7 kids. I've got 5 brothers, 4 of them older brothers. I like to say there's nothing anyone can say about me that my 4 older brothers didn't say while beating me up at the same time. Like, it's good. It's good preparation, right? And but there really is some truth to that. I mean, I feel that. Of course, there's criticism. I can roll with it, but the tone is, I got to say, it's. I've not been around long enough to compare, but it feels like folks are going to their camp, so to speak, right? And I'm not sure how much conversations going on. I'm encouraged by, Senator Lamar Alexander, Republican, and Senator Patty Murray coming together yesterday. I'm losing track of the news. Yesterday, I think, announcing, they're trying. I applaud that, right? I applaud that. And I think it is, I think the invocation talked about sort of leadership. I was speaking about Dan Evans not too long ago, and I thought about him during the travel ban litigation when he was governor. Refugees leaving Vietnam after the war, there were governors who said no Vietnamese refugees in our state. There were governors saying we won't let planes land here and tried to stop planes from landing. As you all know, the one governor who stood up, say you are welcome here, was Dan Evans. He's a role model for someone like me in an issue like that. So I try to stay focused on what I think I can do constructively. But that's a hard question to answer, but that's my view of it. I think the institutions are strong and will last. Yes.
Follow up on your. I'll follow up on your question, on Todd's question about Rob McKenna's step that may be down the line, and for you, and what you just said about him pursuing Obamacare with a coalition of other Republican attorney generals. I think an argument can be made that lost him the governor's race, although it solidified his winning the primary on the Republican side. You've had in that second category of your job where you exercise your discretion some big wins in the Puget Sound area, like Arlene's Flowers and, of course, the travel ban. Mm-hmm. What are your big wins for east of the mountains and west of Puget Sound?
Sure. So I mentioned I've been to 101 Rotaries. They're all around the state, right? So I give the same talk at every Rotary I go to. If you're in the Tri-Cities last week, these are the issues I talk about. So I think if you're talking about opioids, believe me, okay, that's not a Seattle, King County issue. But I'll give you a very specific one that I have a very strong view about. When Barack Obama was president, I sued his administration because of what's going on at the Hanford nuclear waste site, which, as you know, has the most highly radioactive nuclear waste in all of North America is at Hanford. Making this long story very short, Hanford workers there have a very, very challenging job. They work at what's called tank farms, and their job is to take the nuclear waste out of these underground tanks, many of which are many, many years, if not decades, past their useful life. About 30 are called leakers because they leak nuclear waste into the soil near the Columbia River. And their job is to take this nuclear waste out of these tanks and put them in a more secure environment. The problem is there are vapors that are released from these tanks episodically without warning, and workers have been getting sick for a couple decades, in some cases very seriously sick. There have been 19 government reports about this issue. saying workers are getting sick, it's caused by these vapors, and here's what you, federal government, can do to fix it. The federal government's own experts advise them they won't fix it. Look, I filed a lawsuit against the Obama administration over that, right? I don't give a damn what the politics are of the Hanford workers. I don't care, right? And I don't think they care what my politics are. What they care about is they have an advocate in the courtroom taking on the Obama administration. That's what they care about. And thankfully, because of our lawsuit, there are now protections. You haven't read recently about Hanford workers getting exposed because as a result of our lawsuit, while it's pending, they're wearing extra protective gear. So, look, the work we do for consumer protection for Hanford workers on opioids, I mean, yeah, I get the idea that the Trump work gets the headlines. I get that. But I would also admit that that work also impacts people all around the state. There are dreamers all around the state. I was at the Tri-Cities campus for Washington State University speaking. Dreamers are there. They care about these issues. So I view it as one big state. It's why I go around the state and speak. I don't mind that people disagree with me. I believe in saying what I think and what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And I'm okay if people don't agree with that. I just got to do what I think is the right thing.
Over here.
Thank you for coming. It has to do with the Obama or the Trump administration reversing the many executive orders from the Obama administrations. Are you or individually or attorney generals around the country looking at Obama or Trump's reversal of those as to his as an actionable item where he's refusing to follow any laws that he's required to follow, and as an action against those turnarounds?
Just so I'm clear, you're saying in the lawsuits that we have brought against...
No, what I'm saying is that he is going through one by one through about 50 plus executive orders and reversing all of them. Are the attorney generals, how to deal with that would probably be at the attorney general level, and are they states attorney generals looking at the effects of those reversals on their states to get together and try to actually throw the refusals out?
Sure. So a couple thoughts on that. So one is, I guess the short answer is yes, that my team meets every week internally. We talk about potential issues that are going on. I also am in regular contact with other AGs around the country on issues as well. So I think that's the short answer. Looking a bit more broadly is that look, I'm frequently, as Kate knows, asked to sign letters opposing things or to file all kinds of lawsuits that we don't sign or we don't file. I need to go where the law takes us, right? And so there have been cases where, hey, I think there is a harm being done, my view of the world, but it's not illegal. If it's not illegal, it's not my job, right? That's not my job. That's Congress, right? So I ask the same three questions, whether it's an executive order or an action, same three questions. It's pretty simple criteria. Are Washingtonians being harmed? Do I have good legal arguments? And can I, as Attorney General, bring the lawsuit? Do I, as Attorney General, have what we call standing to come to court as opposed to an individual like a dreamer who's directly impacted? The answer to those questions are yes, yes, and yes, then I'm interested, right? If there's a no in there somewhere, and that happens sometimes, I'm not. We've had cases we thought we had good legal arguments and we had standing, but the harm to Washingtonians, maybe I could have made an argument, but really pretty attenuated. Hey, let someone else take that case, right? That's not our case. So that's the criteria we look at. We go through it. Time for one more question? Is that it? I think we got time for one more question. Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you for your service. I know that the kind of controversies that you raise in your office across this very diverse state can be a little bit dicey and somewhat dangerous for yourself. So I wonder if, speaking to this audience after talking to 100 Rotarians or clubs, you could give us maybe 3 suggestions for how to improve the civility of discourse in the state of Washington with regards to the kinds of issues you've brought forward.
I guess a couple. That's an interesting question. Thanks for asking it. I mean, one reason I like going to Rotaries actually so much is, without exception, maybe I can think of one interaction I had at a Rotary. And all those 100, I can think of one. Actually happened in Seattle, for what it's worth, right? And I can think of one interaction. It was about guns, issue around guns. Other than that, I can think of, and even that wasn't that big a deal. It's always just like this. People ask questions and I give my answers, and afterwards people want to talk, and obviously sometimes people have a strong disagreement, but that's okay. So Rotaries are really a model from my standpoint, right? I really believe that. I'm under no illusion that everybody in any room, wherever I'm speaking, agrees with what I'm saying, but folks are listening, I'm listening to their questions, there's a real conversation going on, right? And so however one can take a model like this, I think that's important. Number 2, I just think for all of us, I think one advantage I feel very lucky that I grew up in a big family. Because, take my word for it. I mentioned earlier, there's a wide range of views amongst my siblings. There just is. But we all get along. We're a very close-knit family, right? We're able to do that because you have to respect each other's perspectives and then get along. And you can unite around the Husky football team or the Seahawks, right? You find the things you unite on, but you have to work through those. And I think that's a healthy exercise to continually be around people who don't agree with you about everything about politics. I think that's important. And I think there is, when I talk about sort of two camps forming, I worry that maybe that's going on where people aren't interacting with, even with folks who disagree with them all that much. And I don't think that's healthy. And that's why, I do look, when I was literally within a few days of each other, I was at the Vashon Rotary and the Sunnyside Rotary in Eastern Washington. Believe me, it was right in the middle of the travel ban stuff. The response was very, very different. Polite, but very, very different. That's okay. I think, we're listening to each other. So, and I think each politician as a Rotary to hold politicians accountable to speaking in a way that is, whether you agree or disagree with them, that they conduct themselves in a way that is befitting the office they hold, right? And I think that's important. I was raised, my late father, despite having 6 boys and a long-suffering daughter, 7 kids in the family, I can never remember my father raising his voice. With the possible exception is if the Huskies were losing a football game. That's it. But I mean that quite, I literally can't recall him raising his voice. But believe me, he was a very effective father with those 7 children. The trains ran on time. You did not cross my father. Believe me. A gentle man, but you did not. He said you're doing something, you were doing it. So I just was raised in that environment. I believe that for myself, right? And I do worry about the political tone of politicians as well. And so I'm not sure I've given you great suggestions, but I think the Rotary model is one that I think is, it works for me. It's why I like going to Rotaries. And I guess just to wrap up, thanks so much for the time. It's really been an honor to be here. I'll be sticking around for a few minutes afterwards with Kate if you have any questions. But thanks so much for having Kate and myself here. Really appreciate it.